Hi, everybody. It's Michelle at Living Blue in Texas. I am here today. I'm so excited, you guys, with Representative James Talarico. He is from the Austin, Williamson area. Representative Talarico, how are you? How's it going today?
I'm good. It's already a busy day here at the Capitol, and we haven't even gotten onto the floor yet. There's just a lot of bills that are being filed, a lot of activists and advocates who want to meet and strategize and talk about policy, and then different events to go to. We're at a lunch to celebrate the LGBTQ caucus in the House, and so anyway, it's just one of those days where everything's happening all at once. So
all at once, and you really don't actually get a whole lot of days like that. Maybe like 60 days out of the year.
Exactly, and I mean, session is just like it's really a sprint. We only have 5 months every other year to address the enormous, complex problems that our big state faces, and it's a crazy way to run a state, and it's certainly not an easy job for those of us here in the building.
Absolutely. So I wanted to talk to you about some of the bills that you're proposing this session. I have gone through a lot of them. I think they are fantastic. I think they are amazing. I don't know if they'll all get through. You know how that goes. But some of those include a $15,000 pay raise for teachers, repealing the abortion ban, establishing an office for early education, legalizing and regulating cannabis, and the independent redistricting commission, which is probably needed more than anything. Can you tell me a little bit about how you think some of these bills are going to play out this session?
Yeah, so I think it's helpful to think about the job of a legislator. There's part of our job is to turn ideas into law, right? And those laws can have an immediate positive impact on people's lives. Last session I passed a bill to cap insulin copays in the state of Texas at $25 per prescription. As a type 1 diabetic, that is already improving my life, and it's going to improve the lives of diabetics around our state. Last session I passed a bill to allow incarcerated minors to graduate from high school. And if you were here in my office with me, you'd see a picture right there of Lonnie, who is the first kid to graduate under that bill. And to see the look on his face, look on his family's faces when he earned his high school diploma is invaluable. And so that's part of our job. But then there's another part of our job, which is we can use our platform to start conversations, to shape conversations across our state. And that may not look like a bill passing this session, but if you start the conversation now, hopefully you can see legislation next session, the session after that, and ultimately be able to make big change for people. So there's kind of a short-term job, which is to turn ideas into law right now. And then there's a long-term job, which is trying to start conversations in the state that will lead to progressive change.
Okay, absolutely. And so I know that's something that you're really excited about, that a lot of people are excited about. I heard them talking about it in the Appropriations Committee this morning, is a pay raise for teachers. Right. I think that, everybody in Texas knows that teachers are leaving the profession in droves. How do you think that a $15,000 pay raise will impact teachers overall?
Yeah, and Michelle, that before I was a legislator, I was a public school teacher myself, and I taught 6th grade language arts in San Antonio ISD on the west side of the city, which is a beautiful, historic Mexican-American neighborhood. And it's also one of the poorest zip codes in the state of Texas. So my students had to struggle to not just learn reading, writing, and arithmetic, but they had to struggle to overcome centuries of poverty and racism and oppression. And so, that experience is what moved me to run for office and to try to change some of these systems to help students like mine and families like theirs. And when I was a teacher, I struggled to make ends meet, and I had coworkers who had to drive Ubers at night or who had to sell their own blood plasma to make extra money. I mean, this is happening in the 21st century in the richest country in the world, right? In the state of Texas. And now we have a historic teacher shortage, right? 40% of teachers work a second job to pay the bills. Our teacher salaries in Texas are about $7,500 behind the national average, which puts us in the bottom half of states when it comes to teacher pay. And so it's no wonder we have this teacher shortage. It's no wonder we're seeing educators leaving the profession at record rates. So in my mind, this is an emergency, and it requires emergency action on behalf of the legislature. And so that's why I filed this bill to do an across-the-board $15,000 pay raise for all teachers in Texas, to really start a conversation about the need to go big or go home when it comes to teacher pay this session.
Right, absolutely. And I think, and this is something that I've talked about a lot personally, is that, here in Texas, we see that teachers and, frontline workers are really not making enough to live. Housing, the cost of electricity. But, we've got Governor Abbott, who just a couple days ago bragged about how much money we're spending on the border, billions and billions, up to $10 billion. So do you think that there's something that could be done this legislative session about, what our priorities are, or what the legislative priorities are? Or are we just kind of stuck with, the status quo?
Well, there's the old saying, don't tell me what your values are, show me your budget and I'll tell you what your values are, right? And that's exactly the case here in the Texas legislature. When that final budget is passed out of committee and comes to the floor, we're going to see the values of the Republican majority. And I hope that teacher pay is a part of that. I hope funding public education is a part of that. I hope expanding healthcare is a part of that. And I'm going to push them as much as I can and use as much leverage as I can to get those priorities in the budget. But I do fear, just as you mentioned, Michelle, that we're going to see stunts on the border. We're going to see political games being played with our tax dollars, rather than using public funds to solve the big problems that we all face and bringing Republicans, Democrats together to make our state better and move our state forward. So I am hopeful that we're going to get something done on teacher pay, but we've got to keep at it. And it starts with big, bold proposals like mine, and it involves activists and educators around the state pressuring their lawmakers every step of the way for the next 5 months.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Anytime that we know of a good bill, get on the phone, get on your email, get in touch with your legislator, because, even though sometimes it feels like they don't listen to us, if there's enough of us, they're going to listen.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yep. And you mentioned Greg Abbott was bragging about border stuff. He also brags a lot about stealing businesses from California and Texas. If we did a $15,000 pay raise for teachers across the board, if we launched ourselves as a state into the top 10 states for teacher pay, which is what my bill would do, if we did all those things, we could brag about stealing the best teachers from California, the best teachers from New York, the best teachers from Florida, and bringing them to Texas, right? And that, to me, that's something that everyone should get excited about, regardless of your political party. And I will say, my Republican colleagues have been telling me on the floor the last couple of weeks that they have gotten so many calls and so many emails from their constituents, Republicans and Democrats, demanding a $15,000 across the board pay raise. So that shows me that what we're doing is working.
Yeah, good. So yeah, definitely. I mean, activists at home, let's keep pushing for that. Another thing that I kind of wanted to mention was your bill to establish an Office of Early Childhood Development, I think it was called. But so I read a study recently that was like, for every $1 spent on early child development, the economy makes $3 later on. In Texas, I mean, we're not doing enough. People are quitting their jobs because they can't afford childcare. I mean, it's hard out there, and I live in Arlington, and we just the city here just got full day pre-K for all 4-year-olds, regardless of income, which is a big step. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what other cities are doing that. But an Office of Early Childhood Development, what would be, the things that would come out of an office like that?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking about this bill. This is something I'm really passionate about. Last legislative session in 2021, I passed a sweeping bill to improve the quality of early childhood education in centers across the state, which was a big accomplishment. Not just wasn't just me; it was our team, and it was early childhood advocates who have been pushing for this bill session after session. A good example of why persistence is important when it comes to working in the legislature or politics in general. You may not get what you want this session, but if you keep pushing, ultimately change is going to come. So that was a big victory last session. Now I want to turn our attention to this budget surplus and how we can invest some of this excess revenue into early childhood. 85% of brain development occurs before the age of 3. 1,000 neural connections are being made every second at that age. Intelligence itself is being formed and created in a child's mind. And we are nowhere to be seen for the most part as a society, right? It's almost, I always talk about being prime time for child development. And, prime time in TV world is, 7, 8 o'clock at night. But we as a state are kind of like a TV network who puts all their best shows on at 3 a.m. in the morning, right? Instead of using that prime time when things are really happening. So we have got to do so much to transform this early childhood system in Texas. And part of it is that it's spread out across so many different agencies, right? You have this critical sector, early childhood, that is probably the most important work we could be doing. You mentioned the ROI on early childhood investments. If this is the most important work we could be doing, why is it spread out over the Workforce Commission and TEA and DFPS, right? How can we start to integrate these things so that we as a state are being strategic and thoughtful and focused in our early childhood efforts? That's why my bill would create a statewide Office of Early Childhood Development to be able to coordinate all these efforts and ensure that we're following one strategic plan as a state to ensure that our kids are getting the best head start in life.
Perfect. So, one thing that we really do have to talk about, because it is so pressing. I mean, so just glaring obvious to everybody is the partisanship, I guess, this session, coming off of the heels of everything with Donald Trump and January 6th and, just everything that we've gone through for the last, several years. Do you think that we're going to be able to see some type of bipartisanship, whether for your bills or any bills going on the session?
Yeah, I always have hope. That's how I'm able to work in a place like the Texas legislature, is hanging on to that stubborn hope. And so I never write anyone off. I always try to view everyone in this building as a potential ally, because you could be surprised by what far right Republican may agree with you on an issue, and maybe be willing to work with you on an issue. I think about a bill I passed last session called Javier Ambler's Law. And it was named after one of our neighbors here in Central Texas, an unarmed Black man, father of 2, who was killed by the Williamson County Sheriff's Department. And the whole thing was filmed for a reality TV show called Live PD. And research shows us that when a police, any kind of law enforcement is followed by a TV crew, egging them on to do more dramatic and violent things to citizens, we know that it has bad outcomes, especially for our Black and brown folks in Texas. And so we passed a bill with our Republican colleagues to ban reality TV policing in the state of Texas. No longer can a show like Live PD contract with one of our law enforcement agencies at any level. And that was my bill that I wrote as a progressive Democrat, but it took support from representatives like James White and Jared Patterson, who are on the complete opposite end of the spectrum from me, to pass that bill into law. And so I do want to just remind people that to be effective in this building, you've got to stand up for your values. You've got to be steadfast in your beliefs. You've got to fight like hell every day. But then you've also got to work with an open hand instead of a closed fist, right? You've always got to be willing to reach out to get something positive done for people. And ultimately, that's how we as progressives are going to win elections in the future, is if we can show that even in the minority, we can deliver for working people around the state. And so that's going to be the key to success, I think, for our party and for our progressive movement statewide.
So, and that kind of leads me to the next topic. Democrats, especially Democrats in Texas, have gotten a lot of flack for compromising, I guess, is a fair word, when they should have, or when, you know, voters felt like they should have said fast. For example, last year you were one of all of the Democrats that broke quorum, and you were also one of the first to return home. I know that you did get a lot of pushback from that. I know you got a lot of anger directed your way towards that. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, how that maybe has made you better for this session, and if that's something that Democrats might face again?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I'm so glad that you're bringing it up. And you know, I think the values and the strategic thinking that I bring to this session are the same values and strategy that I brought to the last session, including the quorum break. And I know, you know, I know in this job, you're always going to make some folks angry, and that's okay. And I try to do my best to explain my thinking and my strategy and why I make certain decisions. But I do know that getting pushback, even from my own party, is a healthy part of this process. And I love all my friends, including those who may disagree with certain decisions I made. You know, I was proud to be one of the 57 Democrats who broke quorum twice in 2021 to protest the voter suppression bill here in Texas. And that second quorum break is when we flew to DC to really beg national Democrats, including Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and the leaders in the House and the Senate, to pass federal voting rights legislation, because that's the only way that we were going to stop the voter suppression bill here in Texas. As you know, Republicans control every branch of government here in Texas. And so our only hope was federal action. And when that federal action didn't materialize, and as we know, the filibuster with Senator Sinema and Senator Manchin became a problem, not just on voting rights, but on all kinds of critical issues. Once we recognized that problem, we decided, not just me, but a few of my colleagues, including some of the most senior and well-respected Democrats in the state, made the strategic decision that the only strategic play left was to leverage our return in order to gain concessions in that voter suppression bill. It's still an immoral, anti-American, anti-democratic bill, one that I hate with every fiber of my being. But I knew that my job as a member of the minority is to do harm mitigation. And so by coming back, we were able to remove some of the worst parts of the bill, the ban on souls to the polls, the provisions that would make it easier to overturn the election, taking some of these federal penalties, these felony penalties, and bringing them down to misdemeanors, requiring that these poll watchers, who I don't think should be in the polling place at all, but if they're going to be there, we were able to ensure that they at least have mandated election code training so that they don't have an excuse of saying they didn't know the election code before they violated. So again, it's a terrible bill, but it was a terrible situation without any good options. But I had to use my best judgment, and my colleagues used their best judgment to gain concessions from that bill so that at least we protect as many Texans as we can. Okay.
So do you think that, and I know that you guys are gaveling in today at 2 o'clock, and what I'm guessing is going to happen is that we're going to start sending bills to committees. So you are on the calendars, juvenile justice, and public education, correct?
Yep, I'm on the same committees I was on last time. Those are all 3 committees that I previously served on, and hopefully we'll be able to use my position on those committees to not only pass good bills, but hopefully kill or weaken some of the worst bills that are coming our way.
So on the calendars committee, and you know, I don't actually watch the calendars committee that much because you know, it's like, there's other exciting stuff going on,
Sure.
But it really is a very important committee, a very powerful committee that has the ability to either put or block legislation, you know, from going on the House floor. With the makeup of the committee this session, do you think that Democrats will have a hard time getting their things through?
Well, you know, there are only, I believe, 4 Democrats on the calendars committee, and I believe there are 7 Republicans. I could have my math wrong on that, but Ana Hernandez, Tony Rose, Ann Johnson, and I are the 4 Democrats on that committee. So obviously we are going to be outvoted as we are expecting, but there are ways to use our relationships on that committee, to use the rules to our benefit in order to slow down bad bills. or keep bad bills from getting to the floor entirely, which we were able to do in the last legislative session. What's hard about this job, being a Texas Democrat in the Texas legislature, is you have to get your hands dirty. And sometimes the best win is being able to weaken a bad bill. Sometimes the best win is to delay a bad bill if you can't kill it entirely, although we try our best to kill bad bills all the time. Stacey Abrams, who's a hero of mine, a hero to so many of ours, she was the minority leader in the Georgia legislature when Republicans controlled all branches of their legislature. And she said, sometimes the minority's job is to lose in the best way possible. And that sounds a little depressing, but I think it's empowering when you realize that we, as members of the minority, do have opportunities to reduce harm and to make people's lives better if we use our power strategically and wisely. Faith is very important to me, and my faith, we're instructed to have the heart of a dove and the mind of a serpent, right? Those two things can feel a little contradictory, but having a tough mind and a tender heart are the two traits you need to be able to work in a place like the Texas legislature.
Yeah, and maybe no, never mind. So one thing that I really do want to talk about is the kind of culture focus, which we saw a lot last year. Actually, one of my most watched YouTube clips is your exchange with Steve Toth over the CRT nonsense. But they're bringing that back this year. It's not just CRT, it's DEI, and it's ESG, and it's wokeism, I guess, in general. I don't think that Democrats have had a lot of success in the past pushing back against that. What do you think it's going to take to make sure that these things don't actually make it to our institutions?
Yeah, great question. And you mentioned my efforts on the floor to kill that critical race theory bill. I put that in quotation marks because critical race theory is not taught in K through 12 public schools in Texas. It's a graduate level academic concept that is not taught in public schools. Most folks know that, but it's important to clarify at every opportunity and make sure we're shooting straight with folks and telling people the truth. And, I mentioned earlier that we have to use every tool in our toolbox, whether it's calling points of order, whether it's using relationships, whether it's negotiating, or whether it's extreme tools like a quorum break. All of those tools have to be used to be able to slow down and weaken some of these bad bills. And that's what I did on the critical race theory bill. We called a point of order, we killed the bill. It should have been dead for the whole session, but Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick decided to violate our Texas Constitution and resurrect the bill from the dead. But I do think that our questioning of Steve Toth on the House floor went viral. It was on all kinds of news programs. It went all across the country, and it exposed the true motives of these critical race theory bills, which have nothing to do with CRT and have everything to do with historical whitewashing, which is as old as time itself, right? People in power always want to change how we teach history in order to hide the truth from the next generation. And we have to fight tooth and nail to make sure that all of our kids are taught the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. We were able to do that through our back mic questioning, but we're going to have to do it again this legislative session as well. Okay.
Well, I am really expecting it. I am expecting you and Chia and Turner and Fisher Martinez and all of you guys to really stand up and stop all this stuff. And we are all counting on you. I really wanted to thank you for joining me today. I know that you guys are going into session in just a little bit. Is there any parting words that you'd like to leave us with?
Well, this is a difficult place to work. You have to make impossible decisions. And hopefully at the end of the day, you've done something good for Texans and you've done your best to protect our most vulnerable populations. But the only way we can do that here is with y'all's support and your help and your backup. So I, of course, want to thank you, Michelle, for all the work you do outside this building, and thank everyone who's watching, who makes phone calls and writes letters and sends emails and does all the work on the election side too, because all of those things are going to ultimately get us into a place where we're not playing defense and we're not in the minority. The whole idea is that we got to win elections that we're in the majority and we can actually pass our ideas into law and move our state forward. So I just want to thank you and everyone who's watching for the work that you do to back us up.
Okay, great. Well, you have a wonderful day and good luck this session.
Thanks, Michelle.